Today we are going to learn about U.S. imperialism in the modern era, but it predicates back to, I would even call back to the early modern. So here we go on our journey. Let's have some fun. We are going to start with U.S. imperialism with the Mexican-American War. First area of contention, right, was this wonderful area we know today as Texas. It was an armed conflict between the United States and Mexico between 1846 and 1848. It followed in the wake of the U.S. annexation of Texas in 1845. Just did not stay within Texas. It moved all over the Great Basin and the West for this reason. So let us get to that. So over here, right, you have a big map of the Mexican-American War. Areas I'd like to point out to you are California, right, and obviously Texas and into Mexico City. Battles were fought over here in Monterrey, which was the capital of Alta California for the Spanish, but then when Mexico gained it in 1821, it was a regional capital. The United States obviously did maritime advances through there and did some land advances into the Bay Area, San Francisco. Also, right, in this area, right, is Mexico City. The United States marched in and took over. There was a peace treaty, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which finished this and created a larger expansion for the United States of America. Okay, so the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, right, with the defeat of its army, Mexico, and the fall of its capital, Mexico City, Mexico entered negotiations to end the war. The treaty called for the U.S. to pay $15 million to Mexico and to pay off the claims of American citizens against Mexico up to $13.25 million. That's the United States. It gave the United States the Rio Grande as a boundary of Texas and gave the U.S. ownership of California, a large area comprising New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and parts of Wyoming, Colorado. Huge, the Great Basin area of modern-day United States. Mexicans in those annexed areas had the choice of relocating to Mexico's new boundaries or receiving American citizenship with full civil rights. Over 90% chose to become U.S. citizens. To further our discussions about U.S. imperialism, we're going to look at the Spanish-American War, which was a conflict between the United States and Spain, and the intervention in the Cuban War for Independence. This was supported by Roosevelt Corollary, and resulted in a treaty signed in Paris in 1898, which gave the USA, the Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico, and temporary control of Cuba, which was then given back. In this release right here, the Philadelphia Press in 1898, you can see down in the lower left-hand corner, right here, the United States now has become a global power by 1898. You know, you have the Philippines, right? You have the Samoa Islands, Guam, right, and all the way into the Caribbean area, Puerto Rico, are now part of the greater United States of America. Large, vast, leaving the North America and Latin America, so United States is moving on. Other areas of interest for the United States, right, we'll get to see in the next couple slides. So, the United States and strategic locations. First one we're going to look at is Hawaii. In January 1893, the planners staged an uprising in Hawaii to overthrow Queen Liliuokalani. At the same time, they appealed to the United States Armed Forces for protection. Without President approval, Marines stormed the islands, and the American minister to the islands raised the Stars and Stripes in Honolulu. The Queen was forced to abdicate, and the matter was left for Washington politicians to settle. By this time, however, Grover Cleveland had been inaugurated president. Cleveland was an outspoken anti-imperialist and thought Americans had acted shamefully in Hawaii. He withdrew the annexation treaty from the Senate and ordered an investigation into the potential wrongdoings. Cleveland aimed to restore Queen Liliuokalani to her throne, but American public sentiment strongly favored annexation. The matter was prolonged until Cleveland left office. And about contingencies, congruencies, what we've talked before from Marx and the rise of the West, when war broke out in Spain in 1898, which we previously spoke, the military significance of Hawaiian naval bases was a way station to the Spanish Philippines, which became the Philippine-American War, outweighed all considerations of not annexing Hawaii. So under President William McKinley signed a joint resolution annexing the islands, much like the manner in which Texas joined. We talked previously in the Union in 1845. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, the Panama Canal. France began work on the canal in 1881, but had to stop because of engineering problems and high mortality due to disease. However, you see this quote right here from McNeill. A century later, after 1898, Spanish-American, a new empire rose, all right, made possible or at least inexpensive by further environmental and epidemiological. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Don't know where we stopped off here. An excerpt from J.R. McNeill's Mosquito Empire. A century later, after 1898, a new empire rose in the Caribbean, made possible or at least inexpensive by further environmental and epidemiological change. The mosquito control and yellow fever prevention undertaken by the United States Army allowed them to take over the canal project in 1904 and took a decade to complete. By August 15, 1914, one of the largest, most difficult engineering products ever to take the Panama shortcut greatly reduced time for ships to travel and was controlled by the United States. Right, they built right in here, right, a thoroughfare from the Atlantic, right, into the Pacific, thus gaining control over trade, tying economic and political control. All right, so today we looked at, right, American imperialism in the modern era. I'm going to wrap this around and conclude out with 3 different topics. Yeah, I would say this predicated on the Monroe Doctrine, which is U.S. foreign policy regarding Latin America countries in 1823. I'd state that further efforts by European nations to colonize land or interfere with the states in North or South America excuse me, would be viewed as acts of aggression against the United States. Yeah, this is extended later on in the 19th century and into the early 20th century with the Roosevelt Corollary. President Theodore Roosevelt in the State of the Union address in 1904, after the Venezuela's crisis extended, said, hey, the Western Hemisphere is the United States. This is evident from things that we've seen today. And this even goes further into the 20th century, leading up to World War II, which we'll get to in the next unit, with the Stimson Doctrine. It's a policy of the United States federal government enunciated in the note on January 7th in 1932 regarding Japan and China, of non-recognition of international territorial changes that were executed by force. This is, right, the rape of Nanjing and Japan moving in. This doctrine was an application of the principle of ex injuria jus non oritur, which implies unjust acts cannot create law. Yeah, that moved further into World War II. But today we looked at American imperialism. Hey, what a country.